And I really have to actually thank Dr. Weitzman for picking out this liberal-minded author's book, by Paul Krugman. I don't know, that's one of the reasons why he says that. The FICA basically most likely to burden average workers. Technically it would be assumed by workers up to half. The half would be taken by the employers, so there will be almost equal representation in terms of the FICA burden. But the problem is, here, take a glance at it. Our general rule of tax synthesis says that when the price elasticity of demand, that means, the labor demand is much higher than the plus elasticity of supply, when the burden of an excise tax falls mainly on the suppliers. Suppliers here means labor suppliers, that means workers. So the FICA falls mainly on the suppliers of labor, that is workers, even though on paper half of the taxes are paid by employers. Technically, theoretically, half of them would be assumed by the employers, but there will be much, much greater labor demand. And there will be much greater chances of hiring if the FICA would be burdened by workers. That means, what's the point of having a lower payroll tax? Because the payroll tax, anyhow, anyway, would be assumed by workers. In that way, low-wage workers or temps or temporary suppliers would go back to work. That's really the case. If you ever actually read this one once more, the price elasticity of demand is much higher. That means, there would be more number of job places opened up if this, FICA burden, this is the payroll tax burden, goes down to burden or encumber or infringe upon the hands of the laborers who would barely make their life living. This is really the case. In other words, the FICA is largely borne by workers. That means they're really the main sources who are likely to be chained to this burden in the form of lower wages rather than employers and lower profits. That's really the case. I'm not lying. Excuse me, I have actually maintained great memories from those days. I'm not lying. And if you ever probably read a book written by Main Q, you'll probably have a different viewpoint. I don't know. I've never actually used the Main Q's Economics 101. I've only actually been taught with the Paul Krugman's one, because my econ professor was a pretty much liberal minded. I could actually sense that he was actually far from the school of Milton Friedman, and that was really the reason I decided to sign up for this class at Barnard instead of at Columbia College. If you ever actually if you ever register for the class at Columbia College, then you would expect to see much libertarian professors who would definitely wants to glorify the beauty of a free market and the capitalism, as if they're like the descendants of the Milton Friedman. You remember the Glenn Hubbard? Excuse me, is there anyone who remembers a Glenn Hubbard, who was a beacon of the free market, who was even actually bashed by this famous movie Insider Man or something like that? If you ever actually had any idea about 2008's iconic movie that featured all things that went wrong to botch up the economy in a mass scale. But I'm not really a genius, not at all. I'm a very stupid person with an average mediocre intelligence. But I do actually recognize the FICA burden perplexity, and I really remember this entanglement. That's really the reason I was even actually, scratching my head and saying, the workers would actually be the one who should be laden with this cumbersome burden and onus on their shoulders, and in time of difficulty and uncertainty, full of insecurity, why would you expect to have immediate job openings? That sounds really dubious at the point. That was really the reason why I said that. I'm not really so sure what Donald Trump wants to have with this type of payroll tax slash. That was really the thingy. Please, if you ever actually think that I was mistaken about this, no, not necessarily. At least I was very certain about the portion of the money that would be equally represented and undertaken by workers. Those employees, they're also equally liable I'm not lying. They're responsible for paying this amount of money. They're liable to the payroll tax unless they've been actually hired by the very very strong entities who would actually wipe the floor off for them. No, I'm not lying. The payroll taxes are likely to be shared between those two parties.